One battle after another is finally here, and I'm going to be reviewing it right now. This is going to be less of a review and more me just heaping a massive amount of praise on this film because let's just cut to the chase. This is incredible. Easily the best movie of the year. Not only goes toe to toe with the incredible classics in PTA's filmography, but surpasses quite a few of them. And is PTA doing something that feels like an amalgamation of everything that he's tried to do previously in his career, but also on a scale and with a style that he's never really done before? This movie is massive. It's 3 hours long. It had a $130 million budget. There's a bunch of action set pieces. There's obviously huge movie stars in it. DiCaprio as the head, Benicio Del Toro, Teyana Taylor, Regina Hall, Sean Penn, Chase Infiniti, all in this film, all delivering incredible performances. I'm not really sure where to start, so let me just get into the structure of this film, which I think is almost a miracle that PTA was able to pull this off. This, like I mentioned, is 2 hours and 40 minutes, almost 3 hours long, and begins with like a 40 to 50 minute prologue that is essentially like it could have been a whole nother movie. There's just like so much content in that 15-minute section, and then it leads into a time jump. And this could have felt clumsy if a lesser filmmaker had attempted this, but PTA just transitions from the prologue into like the meat and potatoes of the plot so incredibly well. Maybe it's because whenever they transition, there's like a Steely Dan Dirty Work needle drop that happens, and I just really love that song. It's one of my favorite songs, and I like got goosebumps when that song played because it was so exciting. But he also does a really good job of efficiently communicating the characterizations, the themes, and the ideas, and kind of the general plot of the film within the first 40 minutes before going into the actual plot. And even when you get to the time jump, there's no real like moment of sitting down and relaxing. You know, like the camera's always moving, the characters are always moving. There's not a lot of time to take your breath after that time jump, which I think is why it works so incredibly well. There's not a lot of fluff in this movie at all. There's not a lot of time to breathe. It just like keeps moving. It's like it's such a frenetic pace, and that can feel exhausting, but luckily the score is really great and is able to like keep the pace up the entire way. Johnny Greenwood, obviously the guitarist of Radiohead, scored several of PTA's previous films. This might be the best score that he's ever delivered for PTA or for anyone for that matter. Some really like great intimate guitar stuff in some of the more emotional scenes, but the real backbone of this score is the piano that is just like going crazy throughout a lot of this film. Music is playing over almost every single scene in this film. I should say under more so because it's kind of like the undercurrent of the movie. It's the thing that is dictating the momentum and the energy, and not necessarily the emotion of a given scene. It's not like forcing the audience to feel a certain way. The writing and the characters and the narrative is doing that. This is mainly just there to keep the pace up, which is very crucial for a 2 hour and 40-minute movie that is like at a breakneck pace the entire way through. I love all of these performances, like genuinely one of Sean Penn's best performances, simultaneously really funny, but also like very villainous and creepy and almost monstrous in the way that he is delivering this very specific type of evil that is like pretty prominent within America right now. That's the other thing, is how politically relevant this film is, while never feeling preachy or like it's trying to be a political film. It's just a movie that's very much about the time that we're living in right now, but it's first and foremost concerned with being this really entertaining and very funny action film, which I think was a great choice on PTA's part. DiCaprio in the lead here, really leaning in to the humor in a really incredible way. I was surprised by how little of him and Chase Infiniti there was, because this father-daughter relationship is really the emotional core of this movie. This is like the reason you should care about these characters. And they only, I guess this is kind of a spoiler, but not really, before the plot kicks in, they only really have one scene together, and then the entirety of the plot is largely DiCaprio trying to find his daughter, and so they don't have a lot of scenes together in this film. But it doesn't really matter. You still buy immediately into their relationship, largely because in the prologue you have like this immediate connection between DiCaprio and the baby, and also because that one scene they're in together is just electric. Their chemistry is so immediate. You understand the dynamic between them, which is like very nuanced and not a very like typical father-daughter relationship. And then I think this is the most important part. Whenever they are separated, the desperation that DiCaprio plays in the phone calls, in the running around manically, in the trying to charge his phone, is like so convincing and it is like so emotionally charged that you immediately buy into the fact that he really cares about, he really loves his daughter to the point where he is like willing to do anything to get her back. And I think that is what makes this DiCaprio performance maybe one of his best in quite a while. I love everything that DiCaprio has been doing for the past 10 or so years, but this feels like a completely different kind of register. It's him really leaning into the comedic wackiness of stuff like Wolf of Wall Street or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and really going for it, but also being like very dramatic and emotional. There's a small monologue in a car here that was like one of the best pieces of acting that he's delivered in quite a while. In terms of the supporting characters here, everyone else is doing a great job. I mentioned Chase Infiniti, who her three scene partners in this film primarily are DiCaprio, like I mentioned, at the top of his game. Sean Penn, one of the best performances of his career. Regina Hall, who is I have not really seen in anything, but it is also really fantastic. In this film, Chase Infiniti's character has a completely different dynamic with all three of these characters, and she nails every single one. She is like going toe to toe with all three of these people. Has a lot of reserve to her performance that you don't see in like the cartoonishness of Penn and Benicio and DiCaprio, that I found to be really riveting and just like immediately emotionally connected to both her performance and her character. Teyana Taylor is a weird one to talk about here because she is basically the main character for like the first 30 minutes of this film. And in that time, you have to really establish this character as her choices and the ramifications of her actions are very important for what happens in the rest of the film. But she is largely absent from the rest of the movie. So as the viewer, you have to immediately understand this character, and the performance is a big part of that. And Teyana Taylor does a really great job of not entirely revealing everything about this character. I think this is one of the less explored characters in this film, and one that you could dive deep into and analyze a lot in the things that she does. But the point of it is that she's a little bit more mysterious, a little bit more abstract in her motivations for what she's doing. And I think Taylor plays that really, really well. Aside from that, all of like the small bit players that get like a couple scenes, a couple lines are great. I don't know who the guy is that's on the phone with DiCaprio in a few scenes in this film, but he is hilarious. He's really, really good. Dijon is in this movie, R&B singer. Which is great. Love his music. Can't believe PTA knows who Dijon is. But he is also like surprisingly really great in this film. Let's talk about the visuals. This is like the most gorgeous looking movie of the entire year. It is shot in VistaVision 70mm, which I don't know a lot about cameras or VistaVision really at all, but I do know that this is pretty unprecedented for a movie on this scale. PTA said that very few films have done this since like the 60s when it was kind of the norm. And you can feel like that 60s and 70s influence in this film, both in the visuals and the style and also in the narrative. But this movie looks incredible. You feel the texture of every shot. The colors are very naturalistic, but also vibrant. The camera is always moving. The edit is so quick. So you're just moving from like one beautifully framed shot to the next. I love the way that he uses the camera in this film. It just like zooms through. There's so much energy to everything that he's doing here as a filmmaker. It reminds me quite a bit of what he did earlier on in his career in stuff like Magnolia and Boogie Nights, and recently with like Phantom Thread or even The Master and There Will Be Blood. He's gotten a little bit more restrained in his style and a bit more static with his camera movement, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. It works really well in those films, but here he is like completely going all out, like full bore energy in this film, and that matches the kind of action comedy genre of this film very well, and it also just makes it so propulsive, so much fun to watch. You could argue that it's almost so fun and so diverting that it diverts from the political commentary on display here, but I think the last like 10 or 15 minutes does a really great job of bringing this film back to A, the father-daughter dynamic, and B, the ideas of like generations trying to fix America and the ways that they get it wrong, and like the ways that the next generation then has to like pick that up and like keep the fight going, which like the last 5 minutes of this film kind of feel like a call to arms, not in like a militant way, but like a more of a, go out there and try to change the world sort of way, that was really inspiring, but also didn't feel very corny or overly sentimental. Last thing I want to say about this movie is it is like really, really funny. This is adapted from a Pynchon novel. I'm usually not the biggest fan of Pynchon, but I do think his novels are really, really funny. And PTA is an incredibly gifted comedic filmmaker and comedic screenwriter. And this film is that on full display. One of his funniest movies ever. I mentioned how funny DiCaprio is. His dynamic with Benicio Del Toro is maybe the best part of this entire movie. Like the scenes of them walking around Benicio's house or driving around in the car. Their dynamic works incredibly well together. I love what Benicio is doing here, even if he feels like he's a bit on the periphery and his character isn't delved that deep into. He is just like so funny and has a great screen presence in this film. You also get a lot of political satire in this movie, or more so just like making fun of Sean Penn's character as like this very pathetic, weird Weasley guy. Like I mentioned before, Sean Penn is haunting in this movie, but he is also just so embarrassing that it's really, really funny. I think him and DiCaprio are like the funniest parts of this film. I mentioned the phone call scenes earlier. These are some of the best parts of the entire movie, and it's just DiCaprio talking to someone on the phone, yelling at people on the phone, and it's like a riot. He is doing some absolutely incredible phone acting and really going for it. Like this is such a zany, wacky, weird DiCaprio performance, and I just love that he's doing stuff like this that is just like leaning so much into comedy. I think he's so good at this kind of stuff, and I hope him and PTA work together again. I don't know if they will, because this feels like something that is like such a perfect culmination of both DiCaprio as a movie star and PTA as a filmmaker, that like I don't know if they're gonna like continue to collaborate together. It feels like, how are you ever gonna top this? And that's kind of my feeling. Like how did this work out so well? This is like the perfect version of this movie. Everything went so well. I think that this is one of PTA's. Well, I don't want to say one of his best movies. I'm going to do a PTA ranked in a week or two, and that's when I'll more flesh out my ideas of this film and my opinions on this film. So watch that whenever it comes out. But anyway, I'm going to give this a score. One battle after another. Like I mentioned, the best movie of the year. Hands down. I am going to be giving it a 5 out of 5, and definitely going to be watching it again very soon, delivering more concrete opinions on it in that PTA ranked. So check that out if you want to. Go watch One Battle After Another, because it is an incredibly fun time at the movies while also being a remarkable feat of filmmaking. And that's really all I have to say. Bye bye.